Ever do something that felt like totally right at the time,
Uh-huh.
but later you're like, maybe not so much.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, did I actually make the best choice there, or could I have looked at it differently?
Yeah, and that's basically the root of moral skepticism right there.
So that's our deep dive today, folks. Moral skepticism.
Definitely a juicy one.
We're talking articles, arguments, the whole philosophical shebang.
Really digging in.
And our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to figure out what this whole moral skepticism thing actually is.
Right, because it's easily misunderstood.
Yeah, unpack why it should matter to, well, anyone, really.
Even if you're not, a philosophy professor.
Exactly. And then see if it changes how we think about this whole right and wrong business.
Which it very well might.
Okay, so first things first, gotta start somewhere.
What is moral skepticism not?
Yeah, it's important to clear that up because it's not about just being a bad person.
Right. It's not like, I want to run around breaking all the rules, so I'm a skeptic now.
Exactly. It's not about your personal take on whether, say, stealing is okay or not.
It's questioning if okay even exists.
Yeah, like on this fundamental
The
level.
whole system is glitching, not just one program within it.
Precisely. It challenges the entire framework of how we determine right and wrong.
So it's not just picking a side, it's questioning if there are sides.
And the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, they lay out two main types of moral skeptics.
Hit me with it.
So you got some who think that nobody can ever really know any moral truth.
Okay. And then you've got others who go even further. They doubt whether moral truth with a capital T even exists at all.
Whoa.
Like,
Wow.
is it even a thing?
It's not even shades of gray anymore. It's like, is this even a photo?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really makes you think about all these assumptions we make like all the time without even realizing it.
For real, for real.
Yeah, and that's where it gets a little, interesting.
Okay, so how does someone even argue for moral skepticism, though?
Right.
Like, if it's not just, I'm going to be a jerk,
Yeah.
what leads a person down that philosophical path?
So there are a few really compelling arguments that the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy points out.
Lay it on me.
One of the most common ones is this idea of moral disagreement.
Okay.
Like, if there are these universal moral truths, right?
Like how gravity works, everyone agrees?
Exactly, just like the laws of physics.
Yeah.
Why are people constantly debating these moral issues then?
Like, we don't have, physicists fight clubs over the laws of motion.
Exactly. And that makes skeptics wonder if those truths are really so, black and white.
But couldn't someone say, hold on, maybe it's not about whether the truth is out there, but about, I don't know, how we access it?
Sure.
Like, what if we agree clean water is good,
Yeah.
but we disagree on how to get it because of cultural stuff or lack of information, that kind of thing?
Yeah, and that's where you get into things like cultural relativism, which is a whole other can of worms.
Right.
But then that gets to the heart of another argument for skepticism.
Okay.
This idea of how we explain things in the world morally.
Okay, now you're losing me. Give me an example.
Okay, so let's talk about, let's say, history.
Okay.
If we're saying that what Hitler did was evil,
Yeah.
and that evil is part of why something like the Holocaust happened,
Right.
aren't we kind of accepting that evil is this thing, like this real force
Yeah.
that has these real world effects?
So the skeptic would say we should be able to explain Hitler just through psychology or the political climate or whatever without needing to say evil was a real thing.
Exactly. Like that should be enough to explain his actions.
But even then, isn't it still a judgment call to say his psychology was messed up or the politics were toxic?
Totally. And that's a huge part of the debate, right?
Yeah.
So the non-skeptic would say, no, those explanations still rely on some idea of good and bad.
Even if we don't say it directly?
Exactly.
Okay, this is like philosophical whack-a-mole.
Yep.
Every time you think you've got it, another argument pops up.
It's tricky.
Okay, so we've got disagreement. We got this whole explanation thing. What's the third big one for moral skepticism?
All right, buckle up. This one's a doozy.
Hit me.
It's called the regress problem.
Oh, what now?
The regress problem.
Okay.
Basically, it says that to justify any moral belief, you need another moral belief.
Okay.
And to justify that belief, you need another one.
Oh, boy.
And it goes on forever.
Okay, I'm with you.
So, like, stealing is bad because it harms people.
Yeah.
But then why is harming people bad?
Right, and then so on and so on.
It's like this endless chain of why.
It's like building a tower on a foundation of sand. You can build it up, but it's not really grounded on anything.
Exactly. And skeptics argue that we never really hit solid ground with morality.
But couldn't you also say there are these, really basic moral instincts that we just have that we don't really need to explain further.
Right.
Like, I don't need to read a book to know it's wrong to, like, I don't know, hurt a kid for fun.
Sure.
That just feels wrong.
So that's the counter argument,
Right.
that there are these basic fundamental starting points.
Right.
But then the skeptic might say, well, even those are just like cultural programming
Oh, boy.
or
Yeah.
things we evolved to believe,
Right.
not necessarily like objective truth.
Okay, my head officially hurts.
Yeah.
Are we just going to be in this moral free fall forever?
Well, luckily, there's one more concept to explore that might pull us back from the edge for a moment.
Okay, I need something to ground me, lay it on me.
And it's this idea of what are called skeptical hypotheses.
Skeptical what now?
Hypotheses.
Okay, you're going to have to break this one down for me.
Basically, imagine a world that looks and feels exactly like ours.
Okay.
But every single one of our moral beliefs is wrong.
So, like, a bizarro world where kicking puppies is considered good?
Well, it doesn't have to be that out there,
Okay.
but it's just this thought experiment.
Okay.
Philosophers use this to test the limits of what we can actually know.
Right.
So they imagine these scenarios, however strange they might be,
Yeah.
to see if our beliefs could be completely off base.
Kind of like Descartes and that whole evil demon thing, right?
Exactly.
Where he's like, what if there's this demon tricking me about everything I think is real?
Precisely.
But isn't that just a thought experiment? It doesn't mean morality actually doesn't exist, right?
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
One of the ideas the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy explores is this idea of moral nihilism.
Moral what now?
Nihilism.
Okay.
And that is the belief that nothing, objectively speaking, is morally wrong.
Wait, hold on.
It's not just a thought experiment.
Are you saying there are people out there, like serious philosophers, who believe that even like the worst, most horrific things we can imagine aren't actually wrong?
That's the idea.
That's kind of terrifying.
It's a very unsettling thought.
Yeah.
It really makes you question what you can ever be certain about.
Okay, so if we can't be sure about any of this, how do we even function as a society?
Right.
Does moral skepticism just lead to everyone doing whatever they want all the time?
Well, not necessarily, because just because we're entertaining this idea of moral skepticism, it doesn't mean we have to throw out all of ethics altogether.
So you can be a skeptic and still, like, try to be a good person.
Absolutely.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, we can still have these thoughtful discussions.
Right.
We can think about the consequences of our actions.
Okay.
We can still be considerate of other people. In fact, some people would argue that being a little bit morally skeptical might make us more careful
Oh, interesting.
and compassionate in our choices.
But does thinking about all this automatically make someone, better, morally speaking?
Well, it's not like a magic pill or anything.
Right.
But it definitely encourages humility, I'd say. Like,
Right.
if we accept that our own moral compass might be a little bit off,
Yeah.
we're more likely to actually listen when other people disagree with us.
Right, instead of just like doubling down on what we already believe.
Exactly. Because we're more open to the idea that we might not have everything perfectly figured out.
Right. It's less about having all the answers
Yeah.
and more about like staying open to different perspectives.
Exactly. And having those discussions,
Yeah, both with ourselves and with other people.
Exactly.
So it's not that moral skepticism tells you to just throw out all the rules and do whatever you want. It's more like it asks you to be a little more, I don't know, thoughtful about your choices.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
It's not about negating ethics altogether.
Yeah.
It's just asking for a more, I guess you could say, nuanced and self-aware approach.
This has been a wild ride.
I know, right?
So much to think about.
Having
So for our listener out there who's still with us, trying to process all of this, what would you say is like the one thing to remember about moral skepticism?
It's funny. The sources we looked at,
Yeah.
they don't really give you a straight answer on, like, how do you live with moral skepticism?
Which is kind of the point, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's not about easy answers.
Okay, so no easy answers, Scott.
It's more about asking the questions.
Right.
And being okay with a little bit of uncertainty.
Well, on that note, I think we've stirred up enough existential dread for one episode.
Yeah, probably a good place to stop.
So, to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sometimes dizzying world of moral skepticism.
It's been a pleasure.
If this got you thinking, and we hope it did, head over to our website, check out the show notes, maybe do some more digging on your own.
There's always more to learn.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep an open mind.